I can say without a shadow of a doubt that Cowboy Bebop is not only one of my favorite anime of all time, but is also arguably one of the best pieces of art that I've ever seen. Nothing before or since has ever come close to the unique feeling I share for the show, and while there may be shows or things I like better for one reason or another, Cowboy Bebop lives in a world of its own. While I could point out the various reasons why I feel this way, from the excellent, subtle, and powerful storytelling, to the general art design and styles that are just so damn cool, to the deeply powerful themes and messages that this show offers in a way that an audience can connect to from various points of views, to the wonderfully written characters that are not only timeless but are so extremely real that it's almost scary. I could go on and on like that, but most people who love this show will do so. I mean, if you want a good example of that, see both Digibros and Super Eye Patch Wolf's videos for examples. I instead want to focus on a particular part of Cowboy Bebop that is not only important to it from a pure ear candy perspective, but also as a narrative device and in itself a theme of the story of Cowboy Bebop. That, of course, being its music, which you've been listening to this whole time while I've been firmly placing Bebop upon the pedestal it has rightly earned. Today, we're going to be looking at the soundtrack of Cowboy Bebop and show how it not only is awesome, but how it tells a story all of its own on today's OST evaluation. It should be noted that almost every piece of music in Cowboy Bebop is really fucking good, and is used in a way that conveys a story and ultimately serves to complement the sense of atmosphere. But if I were to do it this justice, then I would go through episode by episode and show you how each song conveys that meaning. And well, if I'm being honest, I don't really think I have the time to do that, especially not all in one video, nor do I think you would want to watch something that long. So instead, I'd rather show you one episode that perfectly conveys my point, an episode that, all in all, fits this very perfectly and shows how Cowboy Bebop uses its music to enhance its storytelling and tell a story almost all of its own. And that episode would be Episode 5, The Ballad of the Fallen Angels. Besides being arguably one of the best episodes in the series and personal favorite of mine, this is the first episode to reveal the small semblance of an overarching story in Cowboy Bebop, even with it being mostly episodic. And while I would never say it's like the main story, it is the main narrative of Spike Spiegel. And it is also the first one to hint at the ultimate message that this show would later follow through on. It should also, finally also be noted that Cowboy Bebop episodes have a name for a reason. They're all references, or at least most of them are references to music. The name, The Ballad of the Fallen Angels, represents the dark, gothic, and religious symbolism of this particular episode, that once again, we will see explored more through its music. From the start, we see a syndicate meeting of peace suddenly go awry when a helicopter blows up and the other leader is held by sword point. Here we are introduced, or rather get a taste of the main villain of Cowboy Bebop, Vicious. It's interesting because there is no music here yet, and in fact we don't really even get a good look at Vicious's face yet. From the start, with him walking through a hall of dead bodies, a big black bird right next to him, and then turning to smile madly when the syndicate boss reminds him of the fact that Spike, if he were here, he would never have done this. This line and this character captures our attention, especially when we come to think about the last 4 episodes.
won't do you any good. The times have changed. The syndicates can't survive like this any longer. This endless bloodletting is tearing us all apart. If Spike were here, you would never have done this.
Through a sequence of events, Faye, who is still relatively new at this point on the Bebop ship, goes out to go on a bounty for the boss Mao. You know, the guy who Vicious just had killed. We see her enter a theater where she is supposed to meet up with the boss. She, of course, acts up her part and slyly gets past security to the balcony where the boss is supposed to be. Everything is pretty chill at this point, and with the upbeat jazzy music playing in the background to kind of complement the atmosphere. After cutting to Jet trying to find out what's going on with this Mao bounty, with it being super expensive and him of course being very suspicious, we then come back to the theater to see they are performing Ave Maria. I really hope I pronounced that right. A connection to the religious subtext of the episode. What happens next can only be described as one of the most powerful scenes for an introduction to a villain ever animated. Again, at least in my opinion. We see Faye approach the balcony box, acting foxy as usual, when she is suddenly surprised by first their openness in having known of her presence coming here, and secondly due to the gun being shoved in her back. We then cut back to Spike trying to find out what's happening to Mao and meeting up with an old friend. As here we see Spike prod her for what happened to him. Her hand trembles. As the music to Ave Maria comes back, we can see that Faye is feeling uncomfortable now, probably wondering what the hell she got herself into. Then it's revealed that they know her name. Suddenly there is this shift in power. I mean, it's weird because the gun, it was a gun, but for Faye, it suddenly feels this shift of power comes with them knowing her name, something that she is extremely surprised by and makes her feel trapped. The music comes to a crescendo as the singer raises his hands to the heavens. Faye takes her seat and then looks to her right and sees the dead corpse of Mao. Then suddenly, this happens.
You're trembling.
Who are you? Tell me.
Vicious.
That is without a doubt one of the most dramatic and powerful introductions to a villain I've ever seen. The music builds up the suspense and conveys the eeriness of the balcony, but also the power that Vicious has over her at this current point, without him even having to look at her. What gets me even more is his name, Vicious. I mean, it sounds pretty cartoonishly evil, doesn't it? Like a Saturday morning cartoon villain. But what seals him as a villain, not just a villain, but a serious threat, is Faye's reaction. Faye, the seductress, the confident bounty hunter, is suddenly brought to fear by simply hearing his name. It should also be noted that Ave Maria is a song hailing Mary and the birth of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. It is also about praying for the sinners and Jesus in the hour of death, a thing of classical beauty, for sure. But as you can see, as it is used here, it's kind of off-putting. It forces you to pay attention to it and the scene in general. It could also be argued that in particular, the part about the hour of death and sinners is used in a clever way to portray everyone in this balcony as a sinner of some sort, and Vicious being a bringer of death. A black bird, by the way, that might not be visible in this particular scene, is almost always seen with Vicious, and this too conveys this image as a bringer of death. A snake in the grass, also complemented by the fact that Mao's dead body lay to the right and Vicious to the left, staring onward without emotion. And I bet you thought they just used that song because it sounded pretty. Well, it's okay. Only nerds like me will know otherwise. The next big song part that I want to show here is one of the most iconic of the series, and is one of my personal favorite of the entire series as well. To cut to the chase this time, Spike is going to go save Vay from Vicious, and finally, it's time for these two that they've been building up throughout this episode to meet face to face again. As a small note, we see Spike acting differently than he normally does throughout this episode. From the talk earlier to how he even speaks to Jet, we see a side of Spike that we have never seen before, true conviction. We also see that while Jet might be a stone cold ass sometimes, he is shown to have genuine care for both Spike and the other's well-being, even if he doesn't want to admit it to himself or show it to them. We are shown the top of a cathedral, crows screaming in the air. We have come back to that image of the crows, often attributed to death, like I said. Flying over the cathedral brings us back to the religious undertones of this episode once more. We then start hearing the song Rain in the background. We cut to a wide shot of Spike walking up a set of stairs, the city behind him suggesting this place distant from the rest of society. We then slowly pan up to the cathedral, and might I say that I love the way the colors convey the somber tone, and the cathedral looks almost like a faded photograph. Deep hues of purple and black perfectly convey that beauty and that dark, gothic sense of atmosphere. We then cut to a shot of Vicious, cascaded in shadows, briefly before cutting back to a shot of Spike walking up to the cathedral. We then cut to another shot of Vicious again, this time further out, the light shining on his back. Or should I say, he himself turned away from the light, cascaded in shadows. It should be noted that he looks very bird-like here in this pose as well. We cut to a shot or two of the colored glass windows, briefly, the song picking up pace, as we see Spike walking in from the blinding light and into the darkness of the cathedral. We cut back and forth between the cathedral's surroundings and then back to Spike again, suggesting the biblical proportions of this meeting. I mean, fuck, this is a really, really big build-up. Death and art and the old age surrounds them. It can also be noted that this cathedral seems completely abandoned, almost forgotten by time, even with all its artistic beauty. This again laments this gothic sense of atmosphere and beauty and sorrow. We then cut to one of the big money shots. We see Spike walking further into the darkness, and then we get a close-up of Vicious's eye opening, as if he could sense the presence of his old friend, like an animal or something. Spike stops and waits, looking around, then stares onward. And then, we see this.
When angels are forced out of heaven, they become devils. You agree, don't you, Spike?
I'm just watching a bad dream I never wake up from.
I'll wake you up right now.
What's your rush, Vicious? After all, it's been a long time.
Are you pleading for your life?
Hardly. Begging doesn't work on you, remember? Even if it's coming from the man who took you in and made you what you are.
Perhaps, but he was a beast who lost his fangs. That's why he had to die, Spike. And that's why you have to die.
Now, if you've been listening to this video at all up until this point, you probably can guess some of the inner meanings here. You can see Vicious's walk out from the darkness, contrasting Spike's entrance from the light. You can see the black bird land on his shoulder as he gives his opening line about angels falling out of heaven, becoming devils. We hear Spike lament about not waking up from a bad dream. It's how he sees his life, how he sees his reality, and the past in general. The darkness always pulling him back. We can see the tension and past of these characters by just a few strings of dialogue, and the way they stand away from each other. The music having had built this confrontation up, and its rhythmic tone as they stand before each other. We understand that these two have a long past with each other, and while it's not entirely clear here what that all entailed, it feels like we're an onlooker in a long rivalry, a battle of the death. It's here we finally get the first thing that seems to break Spike out of his usual cool, laid-back demeanor, and it makes us pay extra attention. If we take the time to listen to the lyrics of the song Rain, we can also see some context as well.
I don't feel a thing, and I stop remembering. The days are just like moments turned to hours. Mother used to say, if you want, you'll find a way. But Mother never danced through fire showers. Walk in the rain, in the rain, in the rain. I walk in the rain, in the rain. Is it right or is it wrong? And is it here that I belong?
Just from the first few minutes, or rather minute, of that song, you can see in the lyrics they suggest a regretful past, time feeling like moments turn to hours, both things that relate not just to Spike, but actually a lot of the characters in this show in general.
I don't hear a sound, silent faces in the ground, quiet screams, but I refuse to listen. If there is a hell, I'm sure this is how it smells. Wish this were a dream, but no, it isn't. Walk in the rain, in the rain, in the rain. I walk in the rain, in the rain. Am I right or am I wrong? And is it here that I belong?
Now these lyrics here relate to Spike individually, so well that it feels like he himself would be singing it, and running away from the past, seeing life as one big bad dream that he hasn't woken up from yet. The past, silent faces in the ground screaming, and in turn this feeling, this loneliness, it all being a personal hell for him. When we cut back to the part about walking in the rain, and him wondering if he's right or wrong, and is it here that he belongs, is a very, very important question for Spike's character. Can someone like him truly escape his past forever? Or does he truly belong here? Is death his only release? Or maybe is the past complemented again by this old cathedral of the past, meeting an old friend, now rival of the past? The past, is it where he belongs? This is a powerful song and speaks volumes about Spike's character. But like I said, what I think is kind of sad is that most people just see it as a cool song they played in the background for a cool scene. And while that may be true, it also reveals the nuances of Spike's character, what makes him more than just a cool badass bounty hunter, and the kind of things that he would never say, honestly. But through music, we can find out more of this character than we might have ever thought we'd get. This is why it kind of bothers me a little bit when people think Spike is an underdeveloped character, or that this show, it's great. Okay, it's great, but doesn't really do much besides being cool. I could understand how some people might feel that way, but if you look just a tad bit deeper, like just a minuscule bit deeper into these things, you can see how the show doesn't really tell its story primarily through the narrative most stories would. It tells it through multiple mediums. It's not a spoon-fed experience, to say the least. And for some people, that might have been a disappointing aspect about the show for them. But to really appreciate Cowboy Bebop, you have to look at the imagery it shows you, listen to the dialogue, and listen to the music choices it makes. And then you understand the subtlety of the show's writing. But I digress. Not to go on too much of a rant here. Let's wrap this up with one final cool scene with music. So after an awesomely animated and fluid shootout, Spike and Vicious finally come face to face, as in, it's here we see Vicious and him fight. We see Vicious uses a sword, again being the contrasting point of Spike, and after a short but very visually pleasing and very exciting fight, which if I go into, we will be here all day, by the way, if we go into all the little other bits of symbolism, like the bird with the red eyes flying away with Vicious comes in from behind Spike in the darkness again, the dialogue between the two of them as they hold sword and gun respectful to each other, that he indeed is Spike's match. Let's just cut to the chase here. Vicious throws Spike out of the cathedral window, and the song Green Bird begins playing as Spike falls slow-mo style. The music gives off a sense of weird, childlike innocence, and yet also a sense of nostalgia, as we see through Spike's false eye, that is revealed to us later in the show's finale, by the way. To only see the past, we get a small glimpse into Spike's actual backstory, and the events that led up to this confrontation. The symbolism of the red rose shown throughout, by the way. We see a shot of Spike and Vicious back to back, fighting off some people, showing the camaraderie they once had. Then we see Julia, shown right after is the red rose, then a gun to her head. And while I can't really go into every bit of this flashback sequence without going into detail about the last two episodes and kind of like pulling all that music and things in, let's just say this whole next couple seconds not only shows us the troubled past of Spike, but seems to want to leave behind, but also foreshadows confrontations with it yet to come. This also is the perfect example of Cowboy Bebop's storytelling method, where we get little snippets of people's backstory, but there is no narrative dump, really. We always get little pieces here and there through dialogue, through small little flashbacks without full context, through music with episode titles. All of these things come together for us to get a full understanding of these characters. And perhaps it's disingenuous of me to say that we get an entirely full picture of these characters completely. And I think that is intentional, not necessarily a drawback of the narrative. Like in real life, you're probably not going to know everything about somebody. And this show really captures that idea that we only get little pieces of people's lives. If you want to see a really good analysis of this part of Cowboy Bebop, look into Super Eye Patch Wolf's video on it. I really agree with everything he has to say, and I kind of feel like anything I say would just be going back over those points he went over. So, wow, this video went on way longer than I thought it would have. but I guess you could say I'm just really passionate about this sort of stuff. Storytelling, character development, music, art, and how they all blend together, especially in the big powerhouses anime, and in one of my particular favorites. Being a writer myself, I can say that it is the sort of stuff that inspires me to do better and ultimately helps me to appreciate the stuff I like even more. But what are your thoughts on this? Cowboy Bebop is far from the only show or thing to use music this way, and I plan on exploring other anime, film, and even video games that use music in an interesting way to tell a story, pull you in, or add context to characters in a show I'm calling OST Evaluation, or OSTE, because I am trying to be cute, I guess. So if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe for future content. And if there's a scene from an anime or game or otherwise something that you really think adds to it, make sure you let me know down in the comments below. And if you agree or disagree with my assessment of how the music adds story to Cowboy Bebop, also comment down below. I'm always looking forward to interesting points of view. So, with that, this is Dylan the Night Owl, flying off.